the most important thing I've done in terms of building AI efficiency and kind of skills quick is just to become a user in my every day-to-day context. In everything I do, I'm thinking about how am I using AI to make this particular part of my life and my job easier for me in this moment.
I'm thrilled to be here today with Tim Castree. Tim is a very old friend, and Tim and I have crossed paths many times. Tim actually and I, we both share Leo Burnett heritage, and we actually met during our time in Starcom. But what I love about Tim's background is I feel like Tim is like the ultimate craftsman tool in terms of experience on the creative side, experience on the media side. You know, was CEO of Group M and Wavemaker, and Tim is now transitioned to be at Amazon, is leading billions and billions of media investment, content creation, as well as their marketing across Europe. But what I really most appreciate and respect about Tim, though, is in the spirit of values-based leader, truly someone who puts people first. And is someone who just has developed trees of leaders who I have had the opportunity to know, and excited today to talk about leadership with you here today, Tim.
Nice to see you, mate. Always great to see such a dear old friend. And I love our shared history, and I think it was love at first sight with the two of us. We kind of bonded from day one on a lot of shared values, and so really happy to talk to you.
So Tim, I know you have a lot of people you've coached and mentors. Maybe we could start with like young Tim. You're growing up. Like, who was the person who really helped you set you on your course? And what are some of the other things that leaders today could take from that experience?
Man, yeah. I mean, it was defining, and still to this day, one of the people I love and admire most in the world. I mean, keep in mind this context, right? I'm a working class farm boy from Australia. I grew up in some very challenging circumstances, and got a lot of insecurity and doubt about my place in the world, especially in a professional kind of context. So, as a young person coming, I was actually an apprentice. I was working in Safeway supermarkets as a marketing apprentice right out of school in Melbourne, Australia, and then Leo Burnett won the advertising business. So it used to be in-house. And then I went, that was my first real job, second job, but my first real job in marketing after that apprenticeship was to go to Leo Burnett. And there's a woman named Melinda Gertz. Well, Melinda Gertz, who was from Leo Burnett, Chicago, grew up in West Liberty. Yeah, she grew up in West Liberty, Iowa. And she literally just saw this, slightly scared, nervous, insecure kid and saw plenty of potential, and just picked me up and tucked me under her wing for 5 years, and invested so much time, effort, energy into my professional development, my kind of psychological development around how I approached work. And in that 5 years, I was kind of transformed from a little a little duckling into this kind of, at least this launched entity. I still had a lot to learn, but honestly, without those first 5 years of kind of care and nurturing from Melinda, I'm not sure where it would have gone next. So I always look back on that as just the most valuable and formative mentoring experience that I've had. And she had no reason. She had to do that. That's just a choice that she made as a leader, and I'll be forever grateful for it.
You know what I love about that story? It's interesting. Leo Burnett, Chicago, Midwest. It's like the profile of the recruit is like Midwest farm kid, makes good in the big city, and it's like the same thing being mirrored in Australia. But it's what I also love about it too is just the idea of potential. It's interesting. Like, how do you, as a leader, how do you start judging people for potential, especially earlier in their career? Be curious how that's influenced your own leadership style, and as you think about building teams today, how do you apply that?
Yeah, the first thing is that because of that experience, I always put a real premium on being accessible, available, and devoting plenty of time to nurturing young talent. So it's definitely I've definitely had a pay it forward model from that day on. And then, yeah, potential's a really interesting one. I mean, it's the most important thing. I think potential for me, at least the way I tend to spot potential first, is it starts with an expressed desire. I really look for hunger first because I was hungry, and there are other ways to exhibit potential. The one most obvious and familiar to me, and the one I know what to do with and harness and nurture the most, is when people lean in, show discretionary effort, show hunger, desire, willingness to learn. That to me is catnip. I can't say no to people like that. If I see that, I want to kind of lean in, kind of pick them up and help steer and kind of motivate that energy. But it's got to come. It's got to come from the person. You can, and so. But as I say, when somebody presents themselves like that to me, I mean, I'm generally all in on helping them to get where they're going.
I love that. I also think for so many people listening, it's like, showing up wanting to play, showing up wanting to win. It's like the put me in coach attitude, I think it's interesting. I think about my own experience. I was at Starcom and you were there. I used to meet with all the new hires, and there was a guy who came in wearing a coat and tie. Everyone kind of made fun of him. And he stood up in front of his peers and said, like, I'm here for my career. I'm meeting the CEO. He's like, I am going to show up as someone who's here to win and committed to making this place a career. Still remember him. He's now CEO of a media agency. And again, like someone who was committed to
we had a similar situation. We had a similar situation at BBH, which was all like T-shirts and black Levi's, and this young account guy turned up with a briefcase, and and it was a very strange. Like everyone else was like courier bags at the time, but he suit, tie, briefcase, and Vaughan came in for this interview, and it was so funny. Everybody saw him come in, and he left, and then literally the whole company was like, hire briefcase guy, get the briefcase guy. Like, and nobody was in the interview. Nobody else knew any other context other than he turned up like that. And then everybody suddenly got really excited to kind of hire the guy who turned up looking ready for business. And he also, Vaughan went on to have a lot of success as well, and was a really great hire. But yeah, you got to show up like you mean it.
I love that story. Just to dialing back, you were talking a little bit about just showing up a little bit insecure. But, I would love you to talk a little bit just about, again, as someone who's changed careers, gone from creative to media, client, like the fear, the imposter syndrome, how do you lean into that? How do you overcome it? What are some of the things that have helped you as you grew into role when people bet on you?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is I grew into it slowly. It's been a journey, a lifelong journey. There were a few peak moments where I felt like I made strides, but it was present very much. I'm early 50s now. I'd say it was very present. I mean, it was at its most chronic in my mid 30s, and then everything from my mid 30s on has been steady improvement in my sense of place in the world, I think, and my place in a company, and to the point today where I'm very obviously comfortable in my skin, very self-assured. I don't regress very often, but that was hard fought, and it was a consistent battle over time for me, or a consistent journey over time. I think the curse I always had is that my desire for learning and growth was actually outstripped my desire for security and comfort. And so I kept throwing myself into situations where if I was ever going to feel insecure and like a newbie, I kept putting myself back in those situations, like chutes and ladders. I keep setting myself back to the start. But in the end, I've been really served by my real hunger to learn and grow, and I've always prioritized that over anything else. And so I look back now and say, that was smart. I didn't know if it was smart at the time or not. It didn't always feel smart, but I had no choice in the matter. It was just the way I was driven. So, yeah. So I'd say it hasn't been linear or fast, but thankfully now I've reached a place where I'm, at least the last 5, 6, 7 years where I'm very, very settled in that.
I love the idea of learning, the desire for learning and growth outstripping your desire for security as a mantra. it's interesting. You hear Rashad talking all the time now, just about the need for reinvention.
Yeah.
And
Because
again, it's
actually, the irony, Andrew, is that the opposite, counterintuitively, the opposite was a mistake. One of the reasons I left traditional advertising agencies, I thought, I don't know where this model's going, and I saw a lot of people kind of comfortable in that, and obviously, I think the importance of big traditional creative agencies has it's slipped over time, and so weirdly, just to try to stay comfortable in that pond, at least, in that stage, that was actually the unsafe. It turns out that
yeah.
was probably the unsafe bet. But at the time, it felt like I was taking a much, much bigger risk. But I think in hindsight, I was probably doing the right thing based on where the world was going.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? It's like the safe
Mm.
thing is the unsafe thing. So
It feels
how
that
do
way to me
you,
in hindsight.
yeah, how do you lean into that fear? And again, I mean, maybe it's because it's prevalent from your day one, but how do you lean into the fear? Like I know a lot of people who play it safe. What advice would you have people for overcoming that inertia?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing for me is, you have to have a story that makes it less scary, right? You can't go in saying, I'm like, I'm about to climb El Capitan without ropes. It's like you've got to have a story of like, how am I approaching this in a way that, I still have security needs. Again, the way I got very poor and challenged, so I've got this underlying need for security. So it's not that it's not there. I think so. The story I would have for myself was, I would always be thinking not just about the learning and what I was doing to throw myself in on the deep end, but what's the value exchange? What am I bringing and what am I getting in this situation? So I'm obviously leveraging assets that I have and skills that I have in a new context. And at the same time, I'm learning something new in that environment. So I would always be very focused on that exchange. I'm exchanging my experience or my ability to translate a business problem into a marketing. I'm bringing this and great leadership skills, and in exchange, I'm going to videology and learning how to operate in a ad tech business for the first time, right? In a sales and commercial leadership role in an ad tech business, but this is what I'm bringing. So you have to be really clear about the value exchange going into a learning moment. And then the other thing I would find really reassuring is to be completely transparent with everybody around you about that value exchange. Gang, I'm here. I don't know shit about X, Y, and Z, but I'm really good at this, this, and this. I'll help you here. You help me there. And I would enroll my teams, and we would enroll each other in that kind of journey of exchange about our skills. So, by approaching it that way, I felt I would create enough of a safety net and a sense that I'm bringing something important to this otherwise deeply unsettling learning moment. But I would also I'd feel like free to kind of operate and be open to that journey by being really honest with each other. I think the risk comes when you turn up, and I've seen people do this, changing roles and careers, turning up and letting that insecurity lead them to project overconfidence or over certainty. And that's when things can go a little bit kind of pear-shaped when you're in a situation where you're orienting toward a new space or learning something brand new. So yeah, I found getting that tension right was pretty important, to having a sense of stability that I could grow from, but also being open to what that new situation was going to deliver for me.
Tim, I love that. There's so much to unpack there. It's like one, do people do people actively have a learning agenda? Like it would be curious, like how many leaders actually saying, here's the 5 things I need to learn over the next 2 to 3 years to be progressive. And then two, being transparent about it, like actually being secure enough in yourself to say, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and here's why I'm here to learn it.
Yeah.
And then I think
I
lastly,
mean, I'd say I'd be surprised at Amazon at the moment. I doubt there's an SVP in the company that's spending less than 30 or 40% of their week on AI as genuine students. I mean, it's like, obviously AI, the world of AI at the moment has created this like, tectonic moment where you got to learn. But we've had these moments, through our entire careers. We've had these moments of quite material tectonic change in the landscape, and it's interesting to be in an environment as accomplished as Amazon, with great leaders left and right, and literally see how much like of a student mindset our most senior people are bringing to this particular kind of point in time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
might be putting you on the spot. So what advice on AI learning? Like as you think about, like, I'm sure something every leader's grasping or and struggling with right now. And I know you're leaning in hard just from other conversations we've had, but what are some of the tips you would have for someone on an AI learning curve?
Well, I mean, the most valuable thing I've done, obviously, we're all looking at it in kind of strategically, capability building, technology partnerships, and how we're kind of transforming our business. So there's not a part of our business where we don't have a kind of AI, on all of our programs, we have AI and automation maturity models and frameworks that we're working towards to say, where's this particular program on its AI and automation journey? And we have some quite sophisticated things. Let's take paid search marketing at Amazon is very automated and AI enabled. And then we have other things that are very still like a cottage industry, still very handcrafted. So everything's on that pathway. So it's important to think about it in the context of the program you're operating. But for me personally, the most important thing I've done in terms of building AI efficiency and kind of skills quickly is just to become a user in my every day-to-day context. In everything I do, I'm thinking about how am I using AI to make this particular part of my life and my job easier for me in this moment. So separate from the strategic journey the company and my teams are on, I've learned the most from becoming a user. And interestingly, over the last months, the model I thought for how AI might support and transform my own growth is very different than what I would have predicted it would have been three,
Huh?
4, 5, 6 months
How
ago.
so?
I honestly, I thought a bunch of months ago I'd be building a bunch of specialized agents to take care of very narrow and specific tasks that I would do day to day. And actually, what I find is using a really good LLM with the right reference data sets and the best prompts is the way I've engineered the most individual efficiency out of my and increased expertise and impact out of my day-to-day work. So I feel like my productivity is 2 or 3x, in the last 6 months. And I thought there would be a lot more building and development that would come behind that. And in fact, it's really just the advancement of the tools plus my proficiency with just how to use foundational LLMs. And the key for me is always getting the absolute best reference data, the reference data or reference documents or the reference material for the LLM to look and mirror and mimic, and then really getting more expert at the way you interact with and prompt and build skill there. And yeah, I've found that's been really transformational.
Very, very cool. Very, very
Yeah.
cool. So
What about for you? What's been your experience? How have you worked differently with AI in the last 6 months?
It's interesting for me. I feel like it's exponential knowledge management and input management. So the thing that's interesting is I feel like my ability to research, scan, summarize, and create better inputs has
Mm,
been the biggest area of value add. So it's interesting, similar to you, it's not like building a ton of agents. It's basically collecting and assimilating information into LLMs to help you better simplify, assess, so you can get to better decisions faster.
yeah.
The other big thing is writing. I used to spend a fair amount of time writing and publishing and outlining,
Mm,
whereas now I find you can just organize thoughts and summaries. It's like if as opposed to starting at A, you're starting at S or T.
mm,
Um, but it's interesting. Your comment on productivity. I feel like smarter, faster.
mm.
Uh, but it's interesting. I have not found, and maybe you can help guide me and teach me, hugely beneficial productivity enhancements on like this job took X and now it takes Y. It's much more I would spend, if I had to do a presentation or give a talk, I would have spent a day Googling and researching whereas now I can do it in 15 minutes.
Yeah, and also for me, it's the speed when you work in a complex, decently matrixed organization where you rely on a lot of skills. Like actually, I find I can go further along on a project without. So the thing that slows you down is the internal alignment, right? But now I can say whatever. I can be working on a problem, and then I can say, okay, approach this problem now. I would say imagine you're a company lawyer with expertise on the privacy and regulatory landscape inside
Yeah.
Europe. How would you think about X, Y, and Z in this context, right? Now, then I can look at that. I can send it to Aaron, my lawyer, and say, hey, is this generally right? Actually, that's generally right. Now, that took 20 minutes, and in the old world, that would have taken a whole back and forth, a meeting, and and 3 days. So I think it's these expert agents and this model of experts is enabling me to do things where, I'll take a business idea and I'll be sending it to the product team with half of the requirements built, from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
And I'll say, or do I have this approach to, the modeling right? Or so I'm just able to take my general knowledge deeper into specialist areas, which is increasing my rate of learning and improving my ability to be a great internal customer and partner for these other functional organizations that I have to work with as well. So yeah, there's a lot of, you're right, it's not like suddenly I'm just I'm producing 500 times more. I'm producing things faster and with better depth and expertise than I was like 6 months ago.
Yeah. It's interesting that it's like even like in an application on StoryTech, it's I used to always joke it's like 8 planners Googling for 2 months to do a journey map.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like you have an AI enabled intelligence platform that can scan 330 million different conversations
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
assimilate it. And
Yeah.
it's unprecedented. It's
Yeah,
unprecedented.
here's our SEO plan. What is it missing? And I'll get an SEO plan from him. Here's what it's missing, and again, I don't assume that necessarily the LLM knows more than my team, but I'll go back and say, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. So yeah, it's funny like how much deeper of an expert like it's enabled me to become in a lot more of the kind of functional areas around the kind of the marketing value chain. It's been super interesting. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, and this is probably talk all day on AI, but one of the things we've also talked a lot about is just kindness and leadership. And like one of the things that's been really on my mind lately is like this, the demanding strongman leadership model. And again, I know from personal experience, you are someone who has just been a champion of kindness and basically had radical success with it. Was maybe hoping you could take a minute just to talk about how do you think about leadership profile and approach?
Yeah. Well, I'd say my pathway to being a kinder leader went through the journey of being an asshole more than I would have liked to have been, and so that's been in my past as well. And when I say asshole, I mean I'm demanding, I'm tough, I have crazy high expectations of myself. I have crazy high expectations of the people around me, and I would get frustrated when those expectations weren't being met. And so under those moments and in stress, it was never beyond me to be excessively tough, rude, unkind, and too task oriented over people oriented. So I'd say in my challenger nature and my drive, those things are really possible and present. And even today, under stress, they can come back from time to time. I'm way more conscious of them than I used to be. So I used to find for me, but I was also, I tried to be a lovable guy, and I was very human, and I love people. I really do. But what I would find, let's call it in my mid 30s, early 40s, I tend to be quite bifurcated. I tend to either be in task action mode, or I'd be in loving everybody up mode. And so, and people could experience the nickname a guy I worked with at BBH had for me. He called me the armor-plated teddy bear. Like he knew deep on the inside, I was but I'd put on this armor plating and I'd come in hard at times. And so people saw both sides of my personality. So they would forgive elements of my toughness, but I never felt completely congruent with that leadership style, and I would leave some conversation saying, I don't like how I handled that. I was too tough. And so I think my journey to a more, let's call it a kind of more congruent view of leadership came about when I started to realize, and it was incited by a particular moment or point in my career where I felt like I was leaning too hard on the drive side of my energy, and I kind of came to this realization that I needed to bring more congruence to my leadership style, and not that, like, I give a presentation at Amazon now called Love and Excellence, and it's basically about how I used to think that love and excellence in the work context were the antithesis of each other. There were two modes to operate out of, as I described, but I really came to learn and realize that that love is the pathway to excellence if you get all that other context right. And so that's become, I guess, the journey for me is one where I'm much more congruent. By the way, it's probably coincided with the shrinking of my insecurity and the increasing of my own sense of comfort and place in myself and in my own skin. I've been able to bring together that more congruent leadership style much more effectively. And so now I do lead with love, and I haven't dropped my standards. And I've found that my leadership effectiveness and my sense of centeredness have each grown as a result of that journey. But it has been a journey.
Yeah, I feel like we need to do a whole other one on love and excellence. What I don't know if it's possible, but what would be the highlights of the love and excellence presentation?
Well, I guess if I had to sum it up, I'd say I do have a bit of a mantra around it, which is the mantra I have for myself, which I used to have written on a card. I won't even get the exact words, but now it's just kind of programmed into the LLM in my head, which is to say, how will I be in this moment if I'm fully present, showing love, kindness, and compassion for the people sharing this moment with me while we pursue great outcomes together? That's my kind of mantra around it. And so if I had to sum up my 60-minute presentation that I give at our Amazon, Leap and Director Day training courses, I would say it sums up with trying to bring that level of awareness and consciousness to every interaction that I have with the people that I'm having an interaction with.
I'm going to stop here, Tim. I think we've hit the top of the mountain. So
All right.
that was just spectacular. I thank you so much for sharing your insight, your vulnerability, and your honesty. It was a fantastic session, but really appreciate your sharing. And I love the idea of how do you bring love and excellence to each moment of your day. So thank you.
You got it, man. Great to see you.